The desert was endless, stretching in every direction like a golden sea. The wind carried sharp grains of sand that cut across the land, and the sky above was a burning sheet of fire. No clouds, no shade, only silence. Silence so heavy that it felt alive long ago. People spoke of this desert as cursed. They said armies had vanished here. Machines had rusted into dust, and even time itself had slowed. Beneath the dunes lay the remains of battles forgotten, weapons buried, bones hidden, and secrets swallowed by the shifting sands. In the middle of this silence, something strange lay hidden deep under the surface, an alien body. Her armor cracked, her skin pale, her chest unmoving. She had been there for centuries, a warrior once feared, now nothing more than a broken memory. Her heart had stopped. Her story ended, or so it seemed. But fate has a way of twisting paths. Fate sends unlikely hands to touch forgotten lives. And on this day, a lone human walked into the desert. His name was Daniel, an explorer, a seeker of old ruins. He had come searching for technology left behind by wars no one remembered. He thought he was alone, but he was not. Daniel carried little with him, only a scanner, some water, and a hope that maybe, just maybe, he would find something that could change his people's future. He had walked for days, his lips dry, his face burnt by the sun, yet his scanner suddenly beeped. A faint signal, weak, almost impossible. But there he stopped, staring at the display. The signal was not metal, not stone, but energy deep below the sand. Daniel dropped to his knees and began to dig, his hands clawing at the hot surface. The more he dug, the stronger the signal became. His breath grew faster, his heart pounded. What was hidden here? Minutes passed, sand poured like water between his fingers. Then suddenly he touched something solid, cold against the heat of the desert. Brushing away more layers, he saw it, armor, ancient, cracked, and beneath it, a face not human, her skin faintly blue, her hair long and tangled with sand, her lips still, her body motionless. Daniel froze, his mind screamed to step back. This was no relic, no machine, this was one of them, one of the enemy his people once fought. The stories said her kind were ruthless, powerful, merciless. They had tried to conquer, and humans had barely survived. Now one of them lay before him, helpless. He should have walked away. He should have left her buried, yet something inside him refused. He stared at her face, and in that silence, he felt something strange, not fear but sorrow. He touched her wrist, cold, no pulse. Then he placed his ear near her chest. No heartbeat, she's gone, he whispered, his voice swallowed by the desert wind. But the scanner still pulsed, faint energy, as if her body held on to something, a spark, a whisper of life that refused to die. Daniel looked at his pack. Inside were tools, a small medical device, a stim unit, enough to restart a human heart. But she was not human still. The thought burned in him. He could not walk away, not without trying. The desert watched as Daniel placed the device against her chest. He pressed the button. A jolt of energy shot through her. Her body shook, then fell still again. Daniel cursed under his breath. His hands trembling, he tried again. Another jolt, no movement, only silence. Sand blew around him. The sun sinking lower, his water nearly gone. Yet he kept trying. Come on. Breathe, he muttered, pressing on her chest, forcing air into her lungs. Again and again, his voice desperate. His arms weak. For a long moment, nothing happened. Only the wind howling across the dunes. Then suddenly her fingers twitched, so slight he almost missed it. Her chest rose just a little. A gasp broke the silence. Her eyes snapped open. Glowing faintly in the fading light, Daniel staggered back. His heart racing. She was alive, she was breathing, and her eyes, sharp and alien, locked onto his. For centuries her heart had been still. Now it beat again. Not by her own kind, but by the hands of a human stranger. The desert had kept her secret for ages. But now the silence was broken. Something forgotten had been awakened. Something dangerous, something powerful. Daniel did not yet know what he had done. He only knew one thing: he had saved her. And in saving her, he had changed everything. Her chest rose slowly, as if pulled from a dream that had lasted forever. Her eyes flickered open, glowing faint like embers under ash, and the first thing she saw was not her own people, not the warriors she once fought beside, but the face of a human leaning over her, his expression filled with shock, with relief, with something she could not name. She gasped for air, each breath like fire in her lungs, her body weak, trembling. Her voice cracked as she whispered words in her broken tongue. The desert wind stole half of them, but one question still reached him. Why? Why save me? Daniel did not answer right away, his throat dry, his mind racing. He had done what no one in his world would have dared. He had touched the enemy, given life back to a heart that had stopped centuries ago. Yet when her eyes locked onto his, he could not see an enemy, only a being as fragile as himself. He swallowed and said the only truth he knew. "Because life is worth saving." His voice was low, almost drowned by the whistling of sand. But the words carried weight. Weight she felt in her bones. The alien woman lay silent, her chest heaving, her gaze unsteady. She remembered the war. She remembered flames and blood, and humans standing in defiance against her kind. She remembered the last battle where betrayal had left her broken, left her body abandoned under the dunes, left her to die, her heart turning cold as centuries swallowed her. Now this human had pulled her back, and her mind burned with confusion, suspicion, and something she could not fight, curiosity. Daniel reached into his pack and pulled a flask. Tilting it toward her lips, she hesitated. Her pride screamed not to accept, but her body betrayed her. Her throat raw with thirst, she drank. The taste strange but life-giving. She coughed, water spilling down her chin, her eyes narrowing, still locked on him. He offered food next, a ration bar. Rough and tasteless, she bit into it carefully, chewing like a creature rediscovering what it meant to live. Every action small. Yet for Daniel, each movement was enormous, proof that she was alive. They sat together in silence, the desert around them endless, the sun sliding lower into the horizon, painting the sand with red and gold, the wind colder now, carrying whispers of night. Daniel felt the weight of her stare, sharp and piercing, as if she could see through him, as if she searched for the reason he had done this. Finally she spoke again, her words halting, her voice a mixture of strength and weakness. "You are human," she said, her accent heavy, each syllable like stone. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, and you?" "You are not," he replied, a small smile touching his lips, though his heart still hammered in his chest. Her face hardened. Her hand twitched as if reaching for a weapon that was no longer there. Then she stilled, her eyes narrowing. "Enemy," she whispered almost to herself, a word filled with centuries of war and hatred. Daniel leaned back, breathing steady. "Maybe once," he said softly, "but not here. Not now." The words cut through her anger like water over fire. She turned her head, staring at the endless dunes, her thoughts spinning. If he was her enemy, why had he saved her? Why risk his life, his water, his strength for her for the first time in her long life? She did not have an answer. Her body shook, exhaustion pulling her down, and she let her head rest on the sand, her eyes heavy. But before sleep claimed her, she spoke, her voice soft, almost unwilling. "What is your name?" "Daniel," he answered, his tone calm, gentle. "And yours?" She hesitated, then whispered it, a name strange, alien, yet beautiful, lost in the wind. Daniel repeated it, awkward on his tongue. Yet she felt something stir when he said it, as if the desert itself had acknowledged her return. Night fell quickly, the stars bursting across the sky. Sharp and endless, the desert turned cold, freezing. Daniel lit a small heat lantern and placed it between them, its glow soft, warming the air. She pulled her knees close, shivering despite herself. He draped a thin survival blanket across her shoulders. She flinched at the touch, but did not push it away in that quiet night. Two beings from opposite worlds sat together, their lives once bound by war, now bound by a moment neither of them understood. Her heart had stopped long ago, but now it beat again, slower, weaker, yet alive. And with each beat, questions grew. Who was this human? Why had he chosen her? What future had been changed the moment he refused to walk away? Daniel watched her as she drifted into uneasy sleep, her face lit by the lantern's glow, and he whispered to himself, not knowing she still half heard, "You are no enemy." Not anymore. The desert listened, silent as ever, but something deeper had shifted, something ancient, as if the sands themselves knew. A story long buried had begun again, and it would not end as it once did. Her heart was reborn, and with it so was hope, though neither of them yet understood the cost that hope would demand. The desert morning came cold, the sun slow to rise over the endless dunes. Daniel woke first, brushing sand from his face, his eyes heavy but alert. Beside him she stirred, her breath uneven, her movements careful as if every muscle remembered pain. When her eyes opened, she looked at him again, not with gratitude, not yet, but with suspicion. Sharp and watchful, she had lived her life with enemies, and humans had always stood on the other side. Now one sat only a few feet away. Watching the horizon with quiet calm, she shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around herself, her armor broken, her strength far from restored, yet her pride burned within. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked, her voice steady though weak. Daniel turned, meeting her gaze. Because I want to understand, he said simply. His words carried no weapon, no judgment, only curiosity. That answer unsettled her more than any threat. Humans in her memory were fighters, destroyers, never questioners, never listeners. Yet this one spoke as if her story mattered, as if her existence was more than a relic of war. She narrowed her eyes. "Do you not fear me?" she asked. Testing him. "My people killed yours. My armies once burned your cities. Your kind should hate me." Daniel exhaled slowly, the desert wind tugging at his hair. "Hate is easy," he said. "But hate does not save lives." He paused, his voice softer. "I don't know who you were before. Soldier, warrior, enemy, but right now, you are someone who needed help, and I gave it." The words struck her like a blade in reverse, not cutting flesh, but cutting into the wall she had built inside. She turned away, hiding the storm behind her eyes. They walked together later that day, Daniel leading carefully across the dunes. Her steps slower, her body still weak, yet her pride refused to show it. Each step a battle, each breath a reminder that she lived again. As they traveled, she studied him, his movements, his choices, the way he offered water without being asked, the way he scanned the horizon before resting, the way he carried her weight when she stumbled. Small things, human things, yet powerful, because they were not expected. Finally she asked, "Why risk your life for me? You could have left me buried. The desert would have kept my secret forever." Daniel looked at her, his face tired but his eyes bright. "Because if I walked away, then I would not be human anymore." The sentence silenced her, strange and heavy. She had been taught humans were selfish, weak, driven by survival alone. Yet here was one who said his humanity was measured not by strength but by mercy. They reached a ridge at sunset, the dunes glowing red beneath the dying light. Daniel sat, pulling his pack close. She sat across from him, her eyes fixed on the horizon, and for the first time since awakening, she spoke of herself. "My name is Liara," she said. The word soft but clear, carried by the wind. Daniel repeated it, his accent clumsy, but she allowed it. A spark of something new forming in her chest. She told him fragments, pieces of a past buried under sand. She had been a commander once, proud, unbroken, but betrayal had struck from within. Her own allies had turned against her, left her bleeding in the desert, left her for dead. Centuries passed. Her heart had stilled, her story erased. Daniel listened, not interrupting, not doubting. His silence was respect, and she felt it. She felt her own voice return as if it had been waiting for someone to hear. When she finished, the air was heavy, the stars beginning to rise. Liara's eyes narrowed. "And you, Daniel? Why are you here in the desert alone?" He smiled faintly, tired but honest. "I'm searching, not for war, not for weapons, but for proof. Proof that peace is possible. Proof that the stories of your kind are not the end. Proof that something new can begin." Liara stared at him, her thoughts twisting, her heart conflicted. She had been raised to see humans as enemies. Yet this one spoke as if peace was not only a dream, but a mission. For a long time they sat in silence, the only sound the whisper of the wind. Enemies once, but here, beneath the stars, something had shifted. The desert was no longer just a grave for the past. It was becoming a ground for something new. Liara did not say it, not yet, but deep inside, she felt the wall of hatred begin to crack. Daniel had saved her life, given her water, listened to her story, and in return, she found herself watching him not as prey, not as foe, but as something else, something she could not yet name. When the night grew cold again, Daniel handed her the lantern, his voice calm. "Keep it close, it will help you rest." She took it, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second, and though she pulled away quickly, her heart gave a strange, unfamiliar beat. As she closed her eyes, Daniel whispered into the night, his words not meant for her, but heard nonetheless. "Tomorrow we keep moving, but tomorrow we are not enemies anymore." The stars watched silently, the desert held its breath, and in that fragile space between past and future, an alien and a human sat side by side. Two lives once divided by war, now beginning to walk the same path. Enemies no more, at least not tonight. The desert tunnels were silent except for their footsteps, soft echoes bouncing off walls of stone and sand. Daniel carried the lantern in one hand, his scanner in the other, its faint light cutting through the darkness. Behind him, Liara walked carefully, her breath steady but her eyes sharp. They had escaped the surface after the machines awoke, old war drones rising from their sleep beneath the dunes, their claws tearing through sand, their sensors glowing red. Both human and alien had run together, side by side, diving into the ruins of an ancient stronghold buried deep underground. Now the tunnels stretched like veins, winding and endless, shadows curling in every corner. The air heavy with dust, Liara pressed her hand against the wall, feeling the old carvings beneath her fingers. Symbols of her people, forgotten and broken. She whispered something in her tongue. Words Daniel could not understand, but the tone carried sorrow. He glanced back, curiosity in his eyes. "What does it say?" he asked softly, careful not to disturb the silence too much. Liara hesitated, then spoke, her voice low. "It says, 'Honor is eternal,' my people once believed that. But honor did not save me. Betrayal buried me here." She stopped, her face hardening. "Perhaps honor is only a word," Daniel slowed, letting the lantern's glow fall across her face. "Maybe honor is not in words," he said gently. "Maybe it's in what we choose to do now." His answer lingered in her mind, echoing louder than the silence. She hated that his words carried weight, hated that they made sense, hated that a human could speak truth she had not dared to admit to herself. They reached a wider chamber, the ceiling high, broken pillars leaning as if time itself had grown tired. Here they rested, Daniel setting the lantern down, Liara lowering herself against the wall, her body still weak though she tried to hide it. For a while they said nothing, only breathing, only listening to the low hum of ancient stone. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice steady. "Tell me the truth, Liara. Why were you left in the desert? Why did your own kind abandon you?" Her eyes burned, the memory sharp even after centuries. "Because I questioned them," she admitted, bitterness in every word. "Because I saw the war was not victory. It was slaughter. And when I spoke against it, they turned on me, they called me traitor. They left me broken and buried." Her voice cracked. "And the desert became my grave." Daniel listened, his jaw tightening, his chest heavy. He thought of his own leaders, of battles fought, of mistakes made. He thought of how easy it was to silence voices of peace. "Then you were never my enemy," he said firmly. "You were their enemy." "Not mine." Liara looked at him, her eyes narrowing. Not with anger, but with disbelief. "And you," she asked, "why risk so much? Why wander this desert alone? Why save me, when every story of my people says you should fear me?" Daniel exhaled, his voice low, almost weary. "Because I don't believe stories, I believe in what I see. And what I see is not an enemy lying in the sand. What I see is someone who deserved another chance." His words cut through her doubts, through her pride, through the layers of hatred she had carried. And for the first time she felt something dangerous, something she had buried long before her heart had stopped. Trust. But trust was fragile, and the tunnels gave no safety. A faint vibration passed through the ground, the sound of metal crawling. The hunters were still searching. The drones were not blind. They would find them. It was only a matter of time. Daniel stood quickly, checking his scanner. Red marks moving closer, he cursed under his breath. "They're tracking us," he said, his eyes flashing to Liara. "We need to move." Liara pushed herself up, her body aching but her spirit flaring. "Then we fight when we must," she said coldly. "But we do not run forever." Daniel nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Spoken like someone I can trust." Her heart gave a strange beat at those words. Her chest tight, she wanted to deny it, wanted to remind herself that he was human, that he was her enemy. But the truth was no longer so simple. As they moved deeper into the ruins, Liara felt a shift, not just in the air, not just in the ground, but inside herself. She realized that if death came for them here, she would not face it alone, she would face it beside him. Trust had begun to grow in the dark, fragile like fire in the wind, yet strong enough to light their path. And in that deep silence, surrounded by stone and shadows, Liara whispered words she never thought she would speak to a human. "Daniel, if we fall together." He looked at her, his eyes steady, his hand tightening around the lantern. "Then together it is," the ruins shivered. The hunters drew closer, but in that moment, human and alien were no longer enemies, no longer strangers. They were allies bound by survival, bound by choice, bound by a trust neither of them had expected. The desert above slept, the stars beyond watched. And in the tunnels of the forgotten, a bond was born that could shape the fate of two worlds. The ruins shook as the hunters closed in, claws scraping against stone, red lights glowing in the tunnels, their metal voices whispering death through the dark. Daniel and Liara stood in the center of the chamber, backs to broken pillars, the lantern's glow flickering like a fragile heartbeat. Daniel checked his scanner. The signals were many. Too many. They had been tracked. Surrounded, no more running, his jaw tightened. His hand gripped his tool rifle. A weapon not built for war, but for survival. It would have to be enough. Liara straightened. Her broken armor still clinging to her frame. Her body weak but her spirit alive, her hands trembled. Yet when she reached for the broken spear at her side, her eyes hardened, glowing faint in the shadows. She had been betrayed once, buried once, but this time she would not fall alone. The ground rumbled as the first machine entered, its metal frame sharp and deadly, claws clicking, eyes burning red. Behind it more shadows moved, crawling from the tunnels, hunters of steel, guardians of a forgotten war, their programming simple: eliminate all who disturb the sands. Daniel whispered more to himself than to her. We can't win this, his voice steady but his breath quick. Liara turned, her eyes blazing with something fierce. Then we do not fight to win, she said. We fight to live. We fight to prove we are not prey. The machines lunged. The chamber erupted with sparks and echoes. Daniel fired first, his shots tearing into one hunter's head, metal shards scattering, the beast collapsing with a hiss, but two more replaced it, claws slashing. Liara moved like a storm, weak yet furious, her spear stabbing through a drone's core. Her movements raw, desperate, but filled with power. She roared, her voice echoing against stone, a sound not of weakness but of defiance. Side by side they fought, human and alien, enemies no more, their strikes weaving together, his precision and her strength, his technology and her fury. The chamber became a battlefield, the dust alive with fire and shadow. But the hunters did not stop. For every one that fell, another came, the tunnels pouring with red light, claws striking, voices humming death. Daniel's rifle heated, warning lights flashing. He cursed, slamming a fresh cell, sweat pouring, lungs burning. Liara stumbled, her body near collapse. But when she saw Daniel cornered, three machines pressing against him, she threw herself forward, her spear breaking, her hands tearing at metal, sparks exploding as she ripped one apart with her bare strength, claws slicing her arm, blood spilling, but she did not stop. Daniel saw her fall to her knees, his chest froze. Liara! He shouted, running to her side, firing wildly, his last shots dropping another drone. But the scanner screamed more were coming, too many. Liara's breathing was shallow, her blood dark against the sand-covered floor. Her eyes locked on his, not with fear, but with fire. Go! She rasped, her voice breaking. Run, leave me, you saved me once! But now Daniel cut her off, his voice fierce. No, I will not leave you, not now. Not ever. He pulled her close, his own body shielding hers, his rifle useless now, battery drained. Yet his hands clenched it like a blade. The hunters closed in, circling, their red eyes glowing, their claws scraping against stone. Preparing for the kill, Daniel held his ground, every muscle trembling, ready to fall but refusing to yield. Liara stared at him, her heart pounding. She remembered his words, life is worth saving, and she realized he meant all life, even hers, even now. Her hand found his. Weak but steady, she whispered, then together. And in that moment, something ancient awakened in her blood. Her armor flickered, the core within her chest, long dormant, sparked with energy. The desert had buried her, but it had not destroyed her. Deep inside, she still carried the power of her people. Light burst from her chest, a shockwave of blue fire surging through the chamber. Machines screamed, circuits frying, metal melting. The hunters collapsing one by one, their claws twitching, their red eyes dimming into nothing. Daniel shielded his face, the blast shaking the ruins, dust raining from the ceiling. When the light faded, silence followed, the chamber filled only with the crackle of dying sparks. Liara collapsed into his arms, weak, her eyes half closed, her body drained, but she was alive. She had unleashed everything left within her, and it had saved them both. Daniel held her tightly, his chest rising and falling, his throat tight. He whispered, "You're still here. You're alive," his voice shaking. Her lips curved faintly, a smile small but real. "Not because of me," she whispered, her voice fading. "Because of us." The ruins were quiet now, the hunters destroyed. The silence heavy but no longer cruel. It was the silence of survival, the silence of victory born from trust. Daniel leaned his head back against the broken pillar, holding her close, his body aching, his spirit burning. They had stood together, and they had not fallen. It had been their final stand. But it was not the end. It was the beginning. The first light of dawn broke over the desert, the sun rising slow, spilling gold across the dunes. The silence after battle was deep, heavy, almost sacred. Daniel sat against a broken pillar, Liara resting weak in his arms. her breathing steady though faint, her eyes closed but not in death, in life, in survival. The chamber around them was filled with the remains of hunters, twisted metal scattered across the floor, sparks still hissing from ruined circuits. The air smelled of burnt sand and smoke. It was a graveyard of machines, proof of what they had faced, proof that they had endured. Daniel's body ached, every muscle screaming, but his heart refused to let go of her. His hands held her firmly as if his strength alone could keep her alive. He looked at her face, pale but calm, and he whispered, "We made it," his voice raw, his throat dry. But filled with wonder, Liara stirred, her eyes opening slowly. Glowing faint in the morning light, she looked at him, her lips curving into the smallest of smiles. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice weak but her words carried weight. "Even when I told you to leave, you stayed." Daniel nodded, his eyes steady. "I told you I would not leave, not now, not ever." She closed her eyes briefly, her chest rising, her heart beating. Fragile but alive, she felt warmth in his words, a warmth she had not known in centuries. Not among her people, not in war, not even in victory. This warmth was new, it was human. Hours passed before they moved again, the sun climbing higher, the desert above waiting. Daniel helped Liara to her feet, his arm around her, her steps slow but steady. Together they climbed out of the ruined chamber, out of the tunnels, back toward the light. When they emerged, the desert stretched before them, endless as always. But it no longer felt like a grave, no longer cursed. The air carried hope. Fragile but real, Liara lifted her gaze to the horizon, the wind brushing her hair, the sun warming her skin, and for the first time since her heart had stopped, she felt alive, truly alive. Daniel watched her, his eyes soft. He knew the world would not understand. Humans would call her enemy. Her people would call him traitor. But here between the dunes, none of that mattered. What mattered was that they had fought together, lived together, and now stood together. They found shelter near a ridge, a half-buried outpost long forgotten. Daniel lit a small fire, the smoke curling into the morning sky. Liara sat close, her body tired but her spirit restless. She looked at him, her voice calm but curious. "What happens now, Daniel? You saved me, you stood with me. But your people will not welcome me. My people will not welcome you. We are both outcasts." Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the flames. "Then we make our own place," he said. "A place where human and alien can stand side by side. Not as enemies, but as something more." Liara tilted her head, her lips parting. "Something more," she repeated softly. The words strange on her tongue, yet they felt true. The desert wind howled, carrying the echoes of their voices. And for a moment it seemed the land itself approved, as if the sands that had buried her now wished to protect her. That night under the stars they spoke more, Daniel telling her of human cities, of oceans that stretched farther than sight, of forests alive with sound. Liara telling him of her homeworld, of skies that shimmered with two suns, of temples carved into mountains, of songs her people once sang before war stole their voices. Each story bridged the space between them, each memory shared became a step closer. Enemies no more, strangers no more, they were something new. As the fire burned low, Liara looked at him, her voice quiet. "Daniel, you gave me back my life, you gave me more than breath. You gave me purpose again, I do not know why, but I know this. I will not leave your side." Daniel reached out, his hand covering hers, firm and steady. "And I will not leave yours," he said. The stars above seemed brighter, the desert less empty, the silence no longer cold. Their bond was fragile, but it was real and it was powerful. They knew the path ahead would not be easy. Their people would not understand. Old hatreds would not vanish, but they had seen each other's hearts. They had fought together, bled together, survived together, and that was stronger than fear, stronger than war. As dawn came again, Liara stood beside Daniel on the ridge, the desert stretching endlessly before them, the wind carrying whispers of change. She placed her hand over her chest, feeling her heartbeat strong and steady, once stopped, now alive, and not for herself alone. She looked at him, her voice firm. "My heart was dead, but now it beats again. It beats not for war, not for revenge, but for this, for us, for a future I never imagined." Daniel smiled, his eyes meeting hers. And in that moment the desert seemed no longer silent. It seemed alive, as if two worlds had found a single heartbeat. Together they walked into the horizon, not as human and alien, not as enemies, but as the beginning of something new. A new story had started, a story buried beneath the sands, a story of trust, of survival, of hope. Her heart had stopped once, but with a human's hand, It beat again, and with that heartbeat, two worlds began to change.